Reginald here. Happy weekend. I have been hard at work doing a bunch of testing. Now that patch 14 is out, I'm sure everyone wants to know where the weapons line up against one another, and I have designed a different way to do it than most. Rather than doing a bunch of breakpoint calculations and hitting things in the Psychonium, I have created a testing protocol. It is a experimental methodology. Now, I am aware that this testing protocol has some drawbacks, especially in the domain of perturbations that are natural to sort of real interactions, right? However, there are a lot of positives. This is a real sort of in-game type situation that I've set up, and it's a good simulation of what a real game is like. And so you can get a good feel for what a weapon's performance will be like across the number of tests that I've developed. Additionally, there's already a lot of creators that are doing good, solid research around how the weapons work and what kind of mathematical data they can put out. But how many people do you have actually trying to create an apples-to-apples experimental comparison between weapons? So that's the niche I'm trying to fulfill here. And I think my work between patch 10 and patch 12 was quite successful. Patch 13 and patch 14 have shaken things up quite a bit, and so there's a need to sort of redo all of the testing that I did previously, as well as reassess how I was doing that testing for sort of the new situation we're in. Now, I have gained a lot of subscribers since patch 13 and 14 came out, so I can confidently say that probably most of you have not seen my experimental protocol up until now. So I will avoid describing what I did before and focus in on what is new. Now, you probably should listen to what my testing protocol is so you understand what I am doing here, but if you really want to just skip to the meat and potatoes of the data and conclusions, feel free to look at the timestamps and skip ahead. Using the first bridge choke point on Magistrati Oubliette, you will use Creature Spawner to spawn in your enemy type of choice. There are 4 testing groups that I will be using and that you can use as well. There is a Horde, Crusher group, Bruiser group, and Rager group. The Horde is constructed in a staggered manner with 30 Groaners, followed by a row of 30 Poxwalkers, followed by a row of 20 Groaners, followed by a row of 20 Poxwalkers. This is a total of 100 enemies. The Crusher group is a single row of 4 Crushers. The Bruiser group is 2 packs of 10 Scab and 10 Dreg Bruisers. Finally, for the Ragers, there is going to be 3 of each type, 3 Scab and 3 Dreg Ragers in a little bundle. Tests are then done by rushing the enemy with a melee attack without using any kind of ultimate ability. Fights are then conducted normally after engagement and the enemies have been properly triggered. For the Horde group and the Bruiser group, you should not use your ultimate ability. For the Rager group and Crusher group, you should. This sets an appropriate baseline for all 4 groups. If you want to vary this pattern afterwards, go right ahead. For everything other than the Crushers, I've chosen these armor types on purpose in order to mix them together and make it harder on the player to hit both of them for breakpoint reasons. The Crusher group, of course, is its own sort of little microcosm of a challenge. They are the toughest enemy in the game, and so they are worth investigating. The only exception to that is, of course, some kind of monstrosity, which, of course, if you choose to test is up to you. You can always do so. In all cases, for all of these fights, your goal is to avoid taking any damage. There is no longer a hard line martyrdom on Zealot that impacts the tests. However, the goal is to set the stage properly. Can I actually achieve this without taking any damage? If you can't with a given weapon, that's a pretty good indicator that there's something wrong with that weapon, or with you, I suppose. The final detail here is that we are going to be using the best weapon we can get of any given type. I did just hear about a mod that might make this process a little easier on me, but for this set of data that I have right now to show you today, I just grabbed the best in class of whatever I had. The stats are all going to be excellently rolled or better. I'm talking like 360 plus, 370s in most cases, a few 380s are in there. Everything's really quite nice in all of the tests that I've done with almost ideal blessings and usually good perks as well. Once baselines are established, you can then vary your perks and blessings, test again, and see if you get different results on a given group of enemies. Or you could even choose different enemies to try and just set yourself your own basis. The point is to create something reproducible that you can use as a ballistics gel type test for your weapons. Alright, so how do we measure this? Well, it's based on time to kill for the group that we are killing. This is measured, and I will show you in the background here, from first hit impact frame to final hit impact frame, where the enemies are all dead. There are cases where there are outliers, where an enemy gets stuck on some terrain, or they are far away from you and you would have to walk over to get them. Cut out those outliers, they don't matter if there's like one guy left. Only if there's like 7 in a corner somewhere should you care about that. The bridge at Magistrati Oubliette's entry point is chosen on purpose because it allows you to easily get a choke point or 2 to leverage so that sweeping weapons like the hammers and Indignatus Crusher won't send everything sprawling too far away to quickly clean up. There are a lot of choke points in real games, there's no reason the testing shouldn't reflect that. For those of you wondering what the margin of error is on these times, I can tell you from my last batch of testing in patch 10, I did stability testing and it was around 4 seconds. Pretty big margin when you're talking about things being 25 to 20 seconds, so keep that in mind. I will have to do new stability testing in this patch, but I haven't had the time. One additional note here, I am using the same build for the same class on every single weapon that I test. This is to set a baseline so that I can then see how much the build impacts the time to kill on various tests. Eventually, we're going to get to the point where we'll want to compare how Inexorable Judgment is to, Blazing Piety or something. With that, let's get into a little bit of setup instructions so that if you want to replicate these tests, you can. This protocol is reproducible by design. It is reproducible by you. You can do the same thing. You can even check my results by doing the tests yourself if you want. Furthermore, all of my data is on a Google Doc, so if you are interested in getting access to that data on a read-only basis, you can come to Reginald's Redemptionist Discord on the server link in the description below, and you can just pop in there and grab it. If you are interested in contributing, you'll have to work with me on that directly. I will give you access and then you can help me generate more test data. If you want to do this, you're going to need a few mods. You are going to require Creature Spawner, Will of the Emperor, True Solo, QOL, Quality of Life, and Solo Play. You are also going to want health bars. Once you have all of this set up, you will actually have to go into the Will of the Emperor mod's Lua file, and then you will need to comment out if mod.settings.disable enemy spawns, then mod.disable enemy spawns. Specifically, that second line there needs to be commented out. If you do not do this, you cannot use Creature Spawner within the actual solo missions, and you won't have much fun if you don't have that. Comments are done simply by hitting the minus key twice. Oh, at last we can talk data. What did we get for the results? I'm excited about this part because while I am far from done on my testing, there's quite a lot of work to do. Some interesting things already came up. A little while back, in patch 12, I was making recommendations on what I thought the chain weapons should be like in patch 13 and 14 and into the future. I wasn't sure when balance changes were going to be made to the chain weapons, frankly. It had been a long time. The good news is apparently most of my suggestions have been largely adopted on the balance front. That doesn't mean they necessarily heard anything I said, but at least it got close to what I wanted. Here is the horde data that I have to offer, paying special attention to the chain sword, the small eviscerator, and the chain axe, we can see where things sort of shook out. It is unfortunate to me that the chain axe remains so slow. I don't really understand its position in the game right now. It feels underpowered. It's balanced around these Slaughterer and Headtaker blessings, and frankly, it doesn't feel too good to use. There's a lot of things to say on this front, but what surprised me was how slow it got. In patch 13, I did some very brief testing that showed that the chain sword and the chain axe had similar times to kill. The Rampage and Savage Sweep Chainsword managed to land at 14 seconds, and a Slaughterer, but not Headtaker, instead Bloodletter Chain Axe, was at 20 seconds, so within the margin of error at that time. This is the exact reason why I chose to add the 50 additional Groaners to my 50 Poxwalkers. I wanted to test the concept that Inexorable Judgment and other talents were taking hold and giving the Chain Axe enough room to be decent, because it sure felt bad on Vet. This was proven probably to be true. In the new dataset, we can see that Chain Axes on Vet and Zealot both are performing in the 40s, while Chain Swords are performing much better, with the exception of my Shred Chainsword. Notably, that Shred Chainsword is being run by a non-crit built Zealot. So the Chain Axe still suffers against hordes, but we'll have to see how it does against those Bruisers, Ragers, and Crushers to really know whether or not it's bad or not. What I can say is the other chain weapons have gone where I wanted them to go. Both of them got a lot better at horde clear, and are still decent in everything else, I'm sure, because I've played with them plenty. The Indignatus also actually got the buff I wanted in that it is now pretty good against a horde. Quite a bit better than it used to be, in fact. It was one of the slowest before, if not the slowest, right in line with the old knife, and now I would describe it as sitting in a fairly competitive middle ground. The hammers, unsurprisingly, remain quite slow at horde clear, and obviously that's because their niche is in bonking specials and elites. Here's something that was surprising that came out of this data already. I did choose a melee build for my veteran testing. My Landsknecht build is intended to be the melee build for a veteran, and that's the one I'm using here. But I didn't expect it to perform this well. With a chainsword, it's hitting basically the same time as the Zealot. That's pretty interesting considering how it feels to play. It's good, but it feels very different. I would say that veteran feels like he hits harder on each individual swing, but he swings a lot slower, and he notably is a lot squishier in a melee fight. So rather than calling him a budget Zealot, it's more appropriate to call him a slow Zealot? For all of you melee veterans out there, I think this is good news for you, because it means your build is viable beyond just I'm good enough to do it tier. It's actually pretty decent. Perhaps some additional refining can be done here to make it better. I will leave the data up for you as we go along. Let's just look at the Crusher data briefly. I haven't finished it all because there's still quite a lot of work to do. As stated, this is a lot of effort, so I will be doing more and updating this regularly and releasing new videos about the balance of the game as I am able to process the data. For the Crushers, there wasn't anything too surprising to me, but there are a few elements that I can describe that did sort of shake up my understanding of this conflict. I have gotten pretty good at these, so I can no longer say what is or isn't very easy. I have managed to complete this task every time without taking damage, with the exception of the Heavy Sword 9 on the first try. The Heavy Sword 9 I took damage, but I didn't think it was germane to the test since I was confident I could not take damage in another test if I had just tried, and I didn't think it would change the time to kill at all since Martyrdom was not impacted. In any case, the Heavy Swords now are pretty decent against Crushers compared to where they were before. They are able to, once Heads Taker gets going, actually stagger Crushers out of their overheads by a well-timed special attack to the head. The time to kill was decent, not good, and it certainly felt like it was really risky to be doing it this way. But, you could do it now in a way that you kind of really struggled to before. It was possible, but it was definitely harder before, in my opinion, at least by my recollection. The Crusher's time to kill is very impressive on these, at only about double what the Crucius is putting out, so a little less than double. And the Chain Axe, of course, felt fine to me because I'm so used to it. The Bull Butcher Cleaver on the Ogryn was a real surprise. Now I'm running Slaughterer and Thrust with a heavy strike build, but my goodness, being able to stagger punch and overhead stagger with the knife and get a reasonable, decent time to kill on 4 Crushers without taking any damage and generally feeling like you can actually fight them was a nice change of pace for Ogryn, who felt very bullied by other Ogryn until recently. So I'm pretty happy with that change overall. Alright, well I have a lot more testing to do, so I'll leave it there, but I wanted to say one thing on my way out the door. I'm generally fairly happy with how balance shook out in patch 14. There are a few things I don't like. Probably the Chain Axe is one. The Revolver is very strong, maybe a little silly strong, but it's not game-breaking. There's a few other things. But on the whole, I am very satisfied with the balance in the game right now. It's a lot of fun to play. I really like the talent trees, and I think the data is going to reflect generally what everybody thinks the game should play like. Maybe some misses here and there, and some things that don't quite reflect the lore in the way we might like. But on the whole, I think people have been pretty satisfied from what I've heard, with just a few outliers, and I think the data will shake that out. Let's keep processing it, I guess, and if I find out anything, I'll certainly let you know. Any surprises that show up could be really interesting and informative, so that's why I'm doing this. Ah yes, I almost forgot on my way out the door 1, 2, 3 other things. I have 3 crusades going on right now. The Chain Axe needs to be great. There is no two-handed Chain Axe yet, and I need one if you don't mind, Fat Shark. And lastly, but certainly not leastly, the change to the push attack on the Iron Helm, with a follow-up being forced into overheads, is really, really gross, so please revert that change. With that, I would bid everyone a wonderful weekend, a happy Sunday, I suppose, by the time this gets out into the world. And I hope you all have a lovely week as well. Thanks so much for visiting. Bye-bye.